Hello, good evening. Good evening, welcome. I am not Dr. Michael Chan. This is a serious topic, it's a serious time, it's a serious room full of serious people. So let me begin with a Steinfeldt reference that only those of a certain older generation, which is to say mine, are likely to get, which is to say that I have the opportunity of bringing the big salad. Which is to say, I'm here to speak a welcome to all of you on behalf of Dr. Michael Chan, who, working so well and so closely with others, managed to make this possible. In an untimely turn of events, Michael's voice forced him to model the value of good listening. Which is to say, again, he lost his voice. But he didn't completely lose his voice, and that he generously offered to author some remarks for me, which I will share here shortly, and if the spirit moves me, I might add some personal remarks as well. So without further ado, I offer you Michael's welcome. Welcome, esteemed guests, faculty, staff, students, members of our community. I am Colin Irvin, the 12th president of Concordia College, and it is my distinct honor to extend a warm welcome to all of you as we gather on the grounds of Concordia College around a timely and significant theme. With Malice Toward None, a conversation about civility, the common good, and the future of the American dream. On March 4th, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln faced both a second term in office and a nation that was deeply wounded by the evils of slavery, the horrors of a civil war, and the corrosion of social conflict. Into that storm, Lincoln spoke these words: "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish and a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." Americans today are also experiencing disturbing levels of division and mistrust in their daily lives. It is hard to find spaces where this tension is not keenly present. School, sports, news, worship, friendships, family life, and of course, social media. Society's invisible fabric is under significant stress, and in some instances, is near a breaking point. We seem to be trapped in a self-reinforcing cycle of tribalism, outrage, mistrust, presenting significant challenges to effective leadership across both public and private sectors. Today's event features the insights of seasoned political leaders, Senator Heidi Heitkamp and Governor Ed Schafer, both of whom have worked for many years to foster the common good in bipartisan ways, despite deep disagreements between the respective political parties. Tonight's dialogue is made possible through the collaboration and support of multiple partners: the Otto Bremer Trust, the Lorentzsen Center for Faith and Work, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, the Oren and Sharron Steinfeldt Foundation, and the Interfaith Alliance of North Dakota. Each organization brings a unique perspective and commitment to today's crucial discussion, reinforcing our shared pursuit of a world that is more joyful, just, and trustworthy. At Concordia College, a Lutheran institution, we cherish our tradition of holding multiple ideas in tension, nurturing students who are thoughtful and informed leaders and learners. Our mission resonates deeply with today's theme as we aim to educate leaders capable of nuanced thinking in an increasingly complex world. In an era where cultural trends often favor echo chambers over debate halls, Concordia is committed to hosting the world's challenging conversations. I said at the outset, if the spirit moves me, I might share a personal note. And I will just say this: I learned firsthand that engaging others who are different and others from different backgrounds and viewpoints is just that, it's personal. I learned this from my dad. My dad was raised until about the age of 8 in an orphanage and spent the next 8 years in a very abusive household. And I think this strangely shaped him into the person he became. He decided at a young age, at about the age of most of our students, not only to be kind to others, but to be open to others. He would literally reach out to everyone, everywhere we went, with a touch. Whenever he wanted you to listen, he would pat you on the shoulder or the leg. elevators, hallways, basketball games, restaurants. This drove my mom crazy. You don't have to pat everybody, she'd say. He was deliberate about this. He knew what he was doing. And he reached out to everybody, but mostly he reached out to the people that other people didn't reach out to. He would reach out to strangers. And I mean that in both senses of the word. The weird friend of the strange cousin. I'm from Idaho, so I could say that. And he would reach out to everybody. He befriended everybody who others wouldn't befriend. My dad would vote and never tell us who he voted for. He'd say, that's for you to decide. When he died at the funeral of this person, this apolitical person who was quick to reach out to other people, there were many political parties represented at this funeral for this maintenance man. There were many religions, many professions, many age groups, and, as my mom would say, a lot of weird people. It was therefore fitting that the song we chose for his wake was the Avett Brothers' No Hard Feelings, a song about living life without enemies, a song that's the lyrics read as follows, and I'll just read you 2 parts. When my body won't hold me anymore and it finally lets me free, will I be ready? When my feet won't walk another mile and my lips give their last kiss goodbye, will my hands be steady when I lay down my fears, my hopes, and my doubts, the rings on my fingers and the keys to my house, with no hard feelings? When the sun hangs low in the west and the light in my chest won't be kept held at bay any longer, when the jealousy fades away and it's ash and dust for cash and lust, and it's hallelujah, and love in thought, and love in the words, love in the songs they sing in the church, and no hard feelings. My hope for everybody in this room is that we all go out with no hard feelings, that song is playing somewhere in the background. In closing, I want to remind everyone that this work we do is personal, that Concordia College is the perfect place for this personal work, as it's a place committed to intellectual inquiry and curiosity, to humility, to kindness. Today, as we navigate through the difficult topics and questions, let us do so with respect and openness. Please, please, articulate your questions and opinions passionately, but again, please remember, disrupting the event or the speaker is not within our tradition of respectful dialogue. I am now delighted to invite 2 leaders who model what it means to have no enemies, President Emeritus Bill Kraft and Steve Hunnings, the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, to the podium. They will offer further insights into the history and significance of this evening's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, President Ervin. Good evening. What a happiness it is to join you in welcoming Senator Heitkamp and Governor Schafer to this forum. Like Colin, I can think of no better place for it because of the relationship focus of this college and because this is a college that was founded by immigrants who sought a future for their children in a new place, a future as American citizens educated to help their families and their new nation flourish. This evening realizes a hope that began before the pandemic swept over all of us in 2020, a hope that arose from conversations among Steve Hunig, then College of St. Benedict President Mary Hinton and I about what we then called the Democracy Project. Our aim had been to bring together gifted public servants committed to work for the common good across ideological divides. Thanks, as Colin said, to the vision of the Bremer Foundation in supporting us, and to the unceasing efforts of the only temporarily voiceless Dr. Michael Chan, we are here. And before turning to my friend Steve, I want to add only one thing. In the angry and accusatory climate of our current politics, there are some who might imagine that civility, which is what we hope to practice here this evening, is some form of whistling in the dark, a foolish plea for niceness when only uncompromising battle will do. They would be wrong. Civility is an act of courage, arising not out of easy agreement about hard questions, but from our shared love of something. Love of our families, of the well-being and promise of our children, the health and safety of our communities, urban and rural, the strength and goodness of this country in a world both beautiful and filled with great need. So tonight, all of us, not just those on stage, all of us join Senator Heitkamp and Governor Schafer in that fundamental art of democracy. Please join me now in welcoming Steve Hennings.
Thank you, Bill, for your great friendship over the years, your steadfastness. And I think the only thing we disagree on is what happened on November 9, 2019, when 8-0 Minnesota played 8-0 Penn State, and Minnesota won. We have different explanations of why. Senator Heitkamp, Governor Schafer. I'll start with a fact that is disturbing and difficult, but establishes a baseline perhaps for our discussion, and that is the American Values Survey, which is a consortium of the Public Religion Resources Institute and the Brookings Institute, found that 23% of all Americans believe that in some cases political violence is legitimate. That's up from 15% a few years ago. That's practically 1/4 of the American polity. So just think about that for a second. At the same time, that's why we're here today. I always feel at home here at Concordia, so many wonderful friends. As President Kraft says, Dr. Michael Chan, who's done so much for this program, has been indomitable, made it happen, the force of nature behind it. So thank you, Dr. Chan, for all that you have done. President Kraft, again, President Irvin, who we've had the chance to meet for the first time today, thank you very much. Dean Sonia Wentling, who has been a great friend over the years. John Pierce, who isn't here tonight, the Interfaith Alliance in North Dakota, so many to whom we owe great thanks for the night, and of course, everybody here who came. I'm the executive of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and North Dakota. Our board member, Jim Shaw, is here tonight, so thank you, Jim, for all that you do for the organization and for Temple Bethel. Thank you to the Fargo Forum for publishing the tri-commentary piece from myself and President Kraft, and then for the Otto Bremer Trust and the Oren and Sharron Steinfeldt Foundation. The Otto Bremer Trust says that their mission statement is investing in people, places, and opportunities in Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. And of course, here we are in the Red River Valley at the confluence of all of our wonderful states, and it's sort of a perfect geographical location. But speaking of Lincoln, what's more important than democracy and an engaged citizenry? Because if you think about the Gettysburg Address, what does President Lincoln teach us? That the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. And that is the challenge that we face, because let's face it, friends, all of our work begins with the defense of democracy. Democracy depends upon an informed polity. If you think about that, anti-Semitism, racism, all other ugly forms of expression are an attack upon democracy because they depend upon falsehood and the promulgation of false information. So when we're defending democracy, we're defending the decency of all of us. The commentary on the Torah, the Talmud, has a great expression, which I always find handy, that is, we are not obligated to perfect the world, but we can't desist from the effort. And as President Irvin wrote or said for Dr. Chan, talking to Lincoln's second inaugural, malice towards none, but we also talking about binding up the nation's wounds, bringing back that 23%. And in the spirit of that Talmudic injunction, it's maybe not our job to fix everything, to suture up the injury that our country has suffered, but on the other hand, maybe it's our responsibility to take a couple stitches and stitch it up and make things a little better for all of us in the name of protecting our democracy. So I want to say thank you very, very much. Wonderful proud in this beautiful facility, and I look forward to a great night of engagement and information and learning. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sonia Wentling, the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences at Concordia College. It is my distinct privilege and honor to welcome and introduce our two guests tonight, U.S. Senator Heidi Heitkamp and North Dakota Governor Ed Schafer. Both are known for long careers in public service and for reaching across the aisle, working toward the common goal of building a better society, trying to live up to President Lincoln's words, with malice toward none, with charity for all. Heidi Heitkamp, born in Breckenridge, Minnesota, grew up in the small town of Mantador, North Dakota, as the middle child of 7, which may have taught her early on how to mediate and find common ground. After graduating from UND with a bachelor's degree double majoring in history and political science, she earned a law degree from Lewis and Clark College. After law school, Heitkamp worked as an attorney for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and for the Office of the North Dakota State Tax Commissioner, and then was elected Attorney General of North Dakota, a post she held from 1992 to 2000. After an unsuccessful bid for governor, we shall not discuss that, she would make history as the first ever female senator elected from the state of North Dakota, serving from 2013 to 2019. During her 6 years in the U.S. Senate, Heitkamp quickly became a proven senator who worked across the aisle to get things done. She prioritized improving the lives of Indigenous people and working families, stopping human trafficking and violence against women, guaranteeing affordable health care, addressing childhood trauma, and securing a U.S. energy policy to do both, lower costs and achieve climate goals. She serves on numerous boards, including the McCain Institute, Restore Democracy Initiative, and the German Marshall Fund. She's the founder and chair of the One Country Project, an organization focused on addressing the needs and concerns of rural America, and serves as a frequent contributor to both CNBC and ABC News. In January 2023, she became the director of the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. In an interview with the student newspaper, the Chicago Maroon, Heitkamp explained her vision for the Institute as a place of collaboration across ideological divides. Quote, whether conservative or liberal, libertarian or green, the goal is to gather people together to have civil discourse on the problems of today, unquote. Governor Schafer shares the senator's vision to engage in civil and honest discourse on the pressing problems of today and to work together in solving them. Born and raised in Bismarck, North Dakota, Ed Schafer began his career in the private sector. He graduated from UND with a bachelor's degree in business administration and earned an MBA from the University of Denver. After finishing graduate school, Schafer went to work for his father's business, Gold Seal Company, a successful marketer of nationally known consumer products, and under Schafer's leadership, Gold Seal's net worth tripled. The company was sold in 1986, and 4 years later, Schafer tried his first run at public office. In 1992, he successfully ran for governor of North Dakota and was re-elected in 1996. As North Dakota's governor for 8 years, he made diversifying and expanding North Dakota's economy, reducing the cost of government, and advancing agriculture his top priorities. While serving as governor, Schafer was elected chair of the Western Governors Association, and in 2000, he was elected chair of the Republican Governors Association. That same year, he co-founded and co-chaired the Governors Biotechnology Partnership to increase public understanding and support for the benefits of agricultural biotechnology. Schafer also co-founded Extend America, a venture capital-backed company to provide wireless, voice, and high-speed data services to commercial and residential customers in 5 rural Midwestern states. From 2008 to 2009, he served as the 29th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Agriculture under the administration of George W. Bush. And from January to July 2016, he served as interim president of the University of North Dakota, another precedent, where he quickly established a reputation as a listener. It's important to talk with people, students, faculty, and staff alike. Schafer is quoted in the UND faculty and staff newsletter. It's important to listen to people, to learn about their experiences, and to hear their thoughts. According to the newsletter, Schafer keeps a quote from St. Thomas Aquinas on hand to help him remember to love them both when listening, those who agree with him and those who might not. On that note, please help me extend a warm welcome to Senator Heidi Heitkamp and Governor Ed Schafer.
I was trying to get Ed to come up here with me, but he's not buying it. Thank you all for this warm welcome, and we're really anxious to get to all of your questions and talk about what you want to talk about tonight. But I think when people ask me, why are you doing this? Why did you come? I said, because so many students on campuses like this have never seen a legitimate, honest, and friendly political relationship across the aisle. The only thing that they have seen in their history has been a lot of rancor, a lot of disagreement, and a lot of mean-spirited back and forth. And so I thought it's just so important that we remind ourselves, as the adults in the room, that things don't have to be this way, that things can, in fact, change, because they change so rapidly from, even the time when Ed and I were in office, I guess now it's 20 years ago, 24 years ago, Ed. But the example that I give about where we are is how North Dakota has changed. I tell people, when I was elected to the United States Senate, no one thought I was going to get elected. I kind of thought I had a shot, but for full disclosure, I was pretty shocked on election night that I might have won. The forum didn't predict it, right, Jack? You kind of missed that one. But I can't resist. I can't resist. I saw you there. I couldn't resist. You should have sat further back, and then it would have been too dark. The lights would have been in my eye. But I tell you this story because when I ran, the reason why national pundits didn't think I could get elected is because they knew Barack Obama was going to lose the state by at least 22 points. If he could win by something less than that, they thought maybe I had a shot. But 22 points, that was just too big of a partisan political headwind. Well, Barack Obama lost North Dakota by 22 points, and I won election to the United States Senate. So at that point in time, people were looking at electing or voting for the person. Not for a political party, not for a slogan, but actually voting for the person. When I ran for re-election 6 years later, and these are important 6 years politically, that number was 4. And Donald Trump won North Dakota by a percentage higher than any other state in the union except 3 in North Dakota. And so it was clear that something had happened to tribalize our politics. And it made it less, I think, politically available to work across the aisle, to be compromisers, to actually do the work of governing. We were in that spot where it didn't matter if you produced 2 farm bills or if you did opened up oil exports or whatever it was that we wanted to brag about that we had done during that time period. None of that mattered. What mattered is whether you belonged to the right tribe and whether you were flying the colors and being loyal. And so I'm not saying it's wrong to vote your political party. That's not wrong. But it also has created a dynamic in this country that has left, in some degree, the people behind. Because the people we go to represent as public officials are the people who are the loudest, the maybe most extreme of our political discussion. And it has driven the narrative. It has made it okay to say really mean things. And if you get that viral moment that you can then fundraise off, it becomes even a competition to see who can get the most numbers of clicks or who can get the most amount of attention on social media. And it has denigrated our political discourse. And we now are at a spot where, how do we fix this? Because right now in America, if you ask people, are they satisfied with the state of the politics in this country, 70% of the people are disgusted by what's going on and feel powerless to change it. And the only way it can change is by broad civic engagement, by good people stepping up. We talked all day, Ed and I did, about what are the solutions to this problem? How do we fix this problem? And what we've been saying over and over and over again is, as the mean, loud voices get louder, the good people are retreating. The good people are saying, I don't want to be part of that. I only have so much bandwidth in my life. I'm raising my kids. I'm helping with my grandkids. I'm trying to put food on the table. I'm trying to do all the things that we all need to do. And I don't have time if it's not going to have value, if it's not going to change anything. And so one of the reasons why we do these programs is to encourage people not to step back, but to step up, to begin that process of engaging, yes, social media, a cesspool of meanness, right? But what happens when 20 people get on the same social media platform and say something nice or say something that clarifies points of view? What happens if you become truth tellers on social media? A lot of times those loud voices retreat. They don't want to be challenged in a way where they look foolish. And so we are doing this program, and if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be affiliated with an academic institution, I would have said that's the last thing I want to do with my time. But I chose that as a kind of second career because I believe that it is so important that we model behaviors, that we encourage critical thinking, but we also encourage civil discourse and dialogue among young people, wherever we can find it, wherever young people are gathered, to model those behaviors. Because if we don't, if all young people and students at institutions like this see is the rancor and the anger and the meanness, they're not only going to step back, they are going to run back. And so, I tell people I am the daughter of someone who was part of the greatest generation. And the greatest generation took on the greatest challenge ever seen in the history of the world. The Nazis, the Axis, the Japanese, the autocrats who would take over the world with horrible, horrible intentions and ideas. But yet we band together in this country and across the world, good people of good intentions, to fight back. We are so good in this country defeating external threats. The last time we were unified in this country was after 9/11, because that was a threat on all of us, because we found our common American identity. We found our common American purpose. It is so much harder to find that common American purpose when the threat in our democracy is ourselves. It's internal. It is, what do we do about where we are today? How do we, and it's not them versus us, it's us versus us. And how do we reach across the aisle? How do we have that civil discourse that will lead to a more perfect union? The divisions in this country have been fanned by bad politics. Because what motivates people more than fear? Fear of the other, Fear of the guy next door. Fear of the person coming to this country who just wants to have a better life because they may look different from you. Fear motivates our politics, and it sells. It's so much easier than inspiration. How do you fix that? Don't vote for fear. Vote for people who inspire you, who have the best ideas. And you may say, where do I find them? Because I've looked up and down that ballot, and I haven't found anybody who has inspired me. We need to make sure that we're not just voting in those general elections, but we are voting and stepping up. And guess what? Someone in this room could be the next inspirational leader. Someone in this room could move our country forward. A young person could be the next governor of North Dakota with the idea of bringing people together and not dividing people. We, the people, are the only people who are going to fix this. Do not look to Washington. Really? Would anyone look to Washington for solutions? The solutions are in communities like this. They're in campuses across the country. They're in your own backyard. We talked to students today, and they said, well, how can we participate? And I said, start by talking to each other. Start by building the skill of dialogue and conversation and communication, and don't be afraid to take on the tough issues. It helps you build character, it helps you build critical thinking, and it helps you build the skills that you'll need to be good at whatever you decide to do, whether it's politics or whether it is religion. You have to have the ability to talk to people and listen to people. And so we're here tonight. I want to thank Ed for taking this on. It's been fun being with you all day, Governor. Probably wasn't so much fun 24 years ago when we were fighting it out. But one of the students asked, how did this work? And I said, well, it worked because I actually like Ed Schafer. I respect Ed Schafer. And Ed Schafer took tough positions. And Ed Schafer cared about how we live and about the state of North Dakota. And so, Ed, it's now your turn to inspire the crew. I'm going to sit over here and heckle you. Okay.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have had a great day on campus, and really it's always a fun opportunity to be with Heidi, have a little political discourse, have some friendship, and share some good memories. So thanks for the opportunity to get together. Sonia, you mentioned that I'm a former president and a former secretary and a former governor. It's kind of like I couldn't hold a job, right? It's like, I actually have a grandson that calls me former. But it is great to be with you here tonight. As we kind of set up this conversation about civility in the willingness to engage in the public process, I thought I'd give you a couple of examples or a couple of things that were messages to me or learning experiences for me in how to kind of navigate that really difficult situation of the badness of politics. Is that a word? the unfortunate anger and difficulty and challenge and fighting in the political party. And one of the things that I learned is when I got in office is there's a big difference between getting elected, which is politics, and moving to the politics of performance, which is after you're there. And one of the things that worked well for Heidi and myself is when our political party, we weren't running for the same office at the same time, but our political parties were certainly engaged in a negative way with each other, pounding on each other. We didn't know about it in '92 because we didn't have the social media out there, but it was, it was a difficult, ugly time. And what happened is that when we came together and were elected, the focus shifted not for the political party or who brought you here or what they did, but it shifted to what's best for the people of North Dakota, what's best for the mission at hand, and how do we relate that not to our political party or our political philosophy, but what happens to the people because, as Heidi mentioned, we are a people-driven government and should be. A couple of lessons I learned along the way after this difficult, I wasn't supposed to win either, by the way, and she talked about 22 points down. After the primary in North Dakota in June, I was 22 points in the hole against my opponent. Gave him a lot of false security, but I was running for office, and the thing that was important to me at the time was, how are you going to perform? How are you going to get the job done? It wasn't a fun time. Politicians are pretty competitive. Things were negative. The better I did, the worse it got on the other side. But you know what? The first person who called me after the election, after I was elected, the first person who called me was a person who had written letters to the editor about how bad I was, how awful I was, and if I would get elected, the state would go down the tubes. It was Governor Art Link. And Governor Art Link called me first thing, and if you knew Art Link, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. I think I just went to bed, actually. But his comment was, look, it wasn't advice about how to run the state or what to do. He said, just stay with who you are. Stand for who you are. Don't get sidetracked by headlines or polls or letters to the editor or your opposition or special interest groups. Be true to who you are and govern the best way you can for the good of the people. Really solid advice. And yes, thank you. So keeping that in mind after the election, and Heidi and I ended up on the Industrial Commission in the state of North Dakota, which is a pretty powerful government board. We didn't have to represent our parties anymore. We had to represent the people of North Dakota and the Bank of North Dakota and the state mill and other important institutions, the oil and gas development and things in the state of North Dakota. So our mission was, how do we do this together? How do we get this done? And that changed the relationship out of the rancor, the politics, into the performance aspect of being there. We were both reelected in those jobs, and Heidi talked about when she first ran for Senate, that things were different politically, but I'm convinced when Heidi wasn't supposed to win, she won because of her performance. She won because she did the job. She won because people understood that she cared about the government, that she directed good government, and she delivered good government for the people of North Dakota. That's why she won, not because of all the political money and the changes. I mean, it was the performance of the people. And if you keep in mind the people, I think you can stay away from the political rancor that takes place all the time. Now, let me give you another example that I have that I think is hugely important about Republicans and Democrats working together. In 2008, when I was Secretary of Agriculture, the World Food Prize is given annually to someone who has been hugely influential globally in nutrition or in agriculture. In 2008, the World Food Prize was given to two people, Senator Bob Dole and Senator George McGovern, together. And the interesting thing was, strong Democrat, strong Republican, both well-known nationally, both strong leaders, but they were given this World Food Prize because of the work they did for nutrition for kids, because they championed not only changes in nutrition programs and WIC programs and food programs for kids in North Dakota, school lunches and school breakfasts, after school programs, they championed, but they did globally. And they talked about how, when hungry kids don't learn. We need in these foreign countries to put programs together to feed people, to get them into school, to get them learning, to get them educated, and how important that was. But the most important thing to me in that ceremony was when the two of them were called up to the stage to accept the award. They stood at the podium, and the first thing they did was sing, "Jesus Loves the Little Children." They accepted the award. they went back down, and of course the Democrats were sitting on one side of the chambers, the Republicans were sitting on the other side of the chambers. But when all the applause was done, everything was quieted, they reached across the aisle and they held hands. That is what leadership is all about. And so that's been inspiring to me ever since, about the way that we deal with people, the way that we try to forge public policy for the good of everyone, not just the political party or whatever. So just to wrap it up here, I'd say just get back to not being able to win elections. No, well, me too. I've been there. I've been there. And we all can kind of take this stuff too seriously. I mean, it's a good idea to be humble out there, to say, well, we have a job to do, but the end of the world isn't going to be there if I don't get my job done, or if I don't get elected or whatever. We have a strong system. It's resilient, it's capable, and it can be driven forward in a good and happy manner. And I appreciate that. I should say, give greetings to you from my spouse, Nancy. She's a cobber. And most interestingly enough is she only agreed to date me because every political pundit, every relative, every person she talked to said he'll never get elected. So don't worry about that. But I do appreciate being here tonight in Cobberland. And I just say one other thing. Concordia is rated as having the best campus food in the state, right? So that's great. Over there, there's the bookstore, there's the cafeteria, there's all kinds of food and drink available. If you prefer, please do go, have some fill your plates, have some fellowship in the hall, tell jokes, go to the bathroom. As a former governor, I'm used to talking to the legislature. And with that, we're ready for the panel and the opening of your questions. Thank you.
We would like to have a conversation with the Senator and the Governor and my co-moderator. Thank you. My colleague, Dr. Nick Howard, Assistant Professor of Political Science and Pre-Law Advisor, will co-moderate the session with me. And I would like to ask the first question. Both of you were talking about good people needing to stand up. And Governor, you were talking about that you need to stay true to yourself. So my question is somewhat of a personal nature. What informs your moral compass, your goodness? What has kept you on the good side to fight for the good people?
That's a great question, because I think it's one of the most, everything's a great question, right? But I think it's a most important element of performance is knowing who you are, what you believe, what you stand for. Because as Governor Link told me, it's so easy to get pushed off by a poll or whatever. If you don't know what you stand for, if you don't know what you believe in, it's very difficult to walk a straight line and get it done. For me, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and my moral compass and character comes from the Bible and the truths of the Bible. And I relate that to what I believe in and how when I'm faced with a situation, when I have to make a decision, when I have to listen to somebody that disagrees or whatever, I go back to the love and the compassion of Jesus, and that's what keeps me in the straight line.
I think it's interesting because I once did Girls State, and a young woman asked me, during the program, she said, "You're Catholic, you were raised Catholic." I said, "Yes." She said, "How do you square your political beliefs with your religion?" And I thought it was kind of a brash question, actually. And I said to her, "I think I am who I am because of my religion. I was raised with a sense of service and commitment to each other. And so, when you look at kind of the tradition that you're raised in, the religious tradition that you're raised in, I think for me, it definitely informed my priorities and what I cared about. And I think when you're a politician, and there is always a shortcut, trust me, there's always the easy way out of making a decision, especially if you're in the legislative branch. It's a little harder to hide the decision when you're an executive, but if you're in the legislative branch, you can always lay low and just go with the flow, right? And no one's gonna know who you are or what you've done. And the bottom line is that the votes that you take may not be the ones that you, the public, understand, but they are the ones that challenge you to live your faith, to live your ideals, to live your values against a big headwind of the people don't want you to do it. And so I would say the votes I'm proudest of are the ones that I felt took a principled position against a big headwind. The votes I'm least proud of are the ones where I copped out, where I took a dodge, where I took a fall, just so I didn't have to confront the tough decisions. And we all, I said this morning on a radio show, I am not Saint Heidi. I've not done everything right. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing that you can do, if you have made, and by the way, when you've made one of those decisions, because you don't feel very good about it. Your internal compass, your internal, conscience tells you that was the wrong thing to do. And the thing that you can do in the spirit of Jesus, I think, is to step back and say, I did not do what I needed to do today. I will do better tomorrow. And we can all grow from the mistakes that we make, from the decisions that we didn't make, or the decisions that we made that were done for selfish purposes and not for purposes of advancing society in the long run.
Thank you.
So I'm going to steal a little bit of prerogative as someone who worked in the U.S. Senate for a little while and studies legislative and executive politics, and ask a two-part question. So for the first part, I'm curious, for both of you having different backgrounds politically in terms of what offices you served in and how you got there, kind of, when you think about the world, what does it mean for a politician to serve and live in this increasingly polarized world we live in?
Is that the first question? That was the second part.
I'll get there.
Do what every good politician does. Answer the question you wanted asked.
It was broad. It was broad for a reason.
I forgot the question.
So what does it mean for a politician to live kind of in this polarized world?
I think that you look at the people who have stood against the wave, stood for principles, and obviously you're all going to know who I'm talking about. People like Liz Cheney, that I would not have agreed with Liz Cheney in any way, shape, or form, but I believe she's a true patriot. Mitt Romney. But I want to mention a friend of mine, James Langford. James Langford and I are about as polar opposite. Other than having red hair, we have nothing in common. But we served. I was ranking member or committee chair. I can't remember which. I think it was one year I was chair and he was ranking, and the next it was reversed. But we did a lot of work together, and we built that mutual respect and a friendship that was kind of really odd given kind of where we came from. but I watched him stand in the void and I think found his voice. And I thought, it doesn't matter whether you agree with what James did or not, whether you agreed, and you all know James Lankford was was the chief negotiator on the immigration reform bill that was never taken up in the Senate. An unlikely hero standing in the void, a profile in courage. And so it used to be that you were in the political limelight and get accolades for being the compromiser, for being somebody who would put the tough work in, come up with a result that may not be perfect. And now to be that person is the greatest risky place in politics. To be a compromiser is the greatest risky place in politics. And that makes this era of our political discourse that much harder, because you are not going to get anything done unless you're willing to compromise.
Thank you. Thank you for the lead-in, because I'm not a compromiser. And I think what back to the question of, how is it to work in the political system today, I love it. First of all, I'm a debater. I like talking to people with difference of opinion. I like gathering a lot of different, some people are a little weird out there these days. But I have this thing in me about, I want to wade into the conflict because I want to solve the conflict, which is kind of dumb sometimes because you can't solve the conflict. But, I really enjoy it. And one of the reasons I enjoy it is because I've been blessed to be held in good stead in the state of North Dakota. So 25 years after we're out of office, people are still saying, you did a good job. What do you think about this? Takes us longer to go grocery shopping these days because everybody wants to talk about it. But I think the important thing is going back to performance. When you've done well, when people appreciate what you were able to accomplish, and maybe they even embellish it over time and think I did a better job than I did. But the point is, it's that I'm a people person. Politics is a people business. I love the interaction, and I actually enjoy getting yelled at once in a while. Not at home, but in the grocery store. but I do appreciate that conflict because I really think that the more that people are willing to stand up and express their views in their direction, the better off, the better policy, the better direction that we're going to get, because you somehow, some way, incorporate what they say in what you do. And it may not be recognizable, it may not be, hey, so-and-so told me that I should do this, but, you gather that information, and the more information, the more feeling you get from people, the more you understand that there is difficulty and angst and people are angry and difficult, but the more you can absorb that, the better job you're going to be able to do moving forward.
So ask for story time a little bit from each of you. On your answers to the first part, what is a specific example in your careers of reaching across the divide, of actually working towards solving these problems in your specific examples?
Well, I think, interestingly, one of the comments or interactions we had with the students today asked a similar question about, or I guess when we were talking to the faculty, is how do you change your mind? Or, is an institution here the education and learning that allows me to change my mind, to gather the information? One of the things I was talking about was there was a time when there was a difficult policy decision on the table, and I think it was Heidi, I'm not sure, but we had to go into this meeting with a plan, with what we wanted the outcome to be. The staff was all tuned up, we had all the notes, everything was there, and during this time of the meeting, I changed my mind because what was being said, the other side, the other thing that was going on, and it was that, again, that experience with the staff, was like, what are you doing? But really it was that drawing of the information that said, okay, maybe that is the best way to go. And again, it's the focus on not your political philosophy or your direction, but it's like, what's best for the people here? There was a time when I vetoed a piece of legislation, and it became apparent afterward that was probably the wrong decision. And I actually wrote a letter to the legislators and said, override my veto, So, you have to be, you have to be willing out there to, accept that information and do what's right. It was one of the tenets in our office was do the right thing, and we tried to do that as much as we could.
And I think my whole history in the Senate is one of working across the aisle. You couldn't get anything done. Senate's a place where you need 60 votes. And if you're not crossing over to try and get somebody to agree with you, to work with you, you really aren't getting it done. But I think some of the things that you do that people don't see or never result in legislation. People always say, well, what's the one thing you could tell me about your work? Well, I'm a big believer that a lot of challenges families have and individuals have is related to adverse childhood experiences and childhood trauma. If you've studied childhood trauma, you know if you have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, there's 10. But if your score is 4, your life expectancy is 20 years less than anyone else in the country. These are indicators that tell us whether you're going to have mental health challenges, whether you're going to have addiction challenges. And so I came to the Senate wanting to find solutions to problems, not just treat the symptoms, but what are the root causes of the challenges that people have and families have, particularly children. And I knew that if I started preaching adverse childhood experiences and childhood trauma, everybody'd go, yeah, whatever. And so what we did in my office is we put together a series of interventions and seminars, starting with staff, bringing in staff members, and we started, and maybe there were 30 people at the first one. By the time we finished bringing experts talking about this, we had over 150 staff people in the room, because word of mouth spread that this is pretty interesting stuff. And today in legislation, it's not going to have my name on it, but pretty much every piece of mental health legislation, every piece of education legislation will have a component that deals with childhood trauma. Okay, what does that mean? It means we'll never know whether we'll see healthier children or whether we'll have better interventions. But it does mean that you can have an impact that goes beyond just one piece of legislation, one farm bill, one banking bill that opens up community bankers to more opportunities. I go through all that. But if you said, what's the one thing that I think, if I had to say, might have a lasting impact with absolutely no attribution ever for me, it's the work that we did on adverse childhood experiences and childhood trauma, because I think it's critical.
So compromise can bring good things
That's
about.
not a compromiser. Isn't that what you said?
Just to follow up on that.
You got to hold the mic up, Ed.
To follow up on that?
Yeah, he's been out of politics longer than I have.
But here's my point. I don't think that you have to compromise to craft good public policy. And we always say you have to compromise. You have to do it. After my first legislative session, in the sine die party, which is what everybody claps when it's all over, Republican legislators came up to me and said, "You don't compromise. You don't compromise on anything." I said, "I compromise for not my values. We put forth, I don't have to give up my values to understand what's best for the people. And so I'm willing to incorporate what's best for the people. I don't have to compromise my values, what I believe, what I care about. I don't have to give that up. But I can craft policy that is beneficial for the common good." And I think that makes a difference. And So it always bugs me when people say, well, you have to compromise. You don't. People say you have to be a moderate Republican.
Spoken like a governor.
Well, then let's not use the word compromise. But you do have to work together,
Yes,
right, to get things done. So what advice would you give our younger generation that maybe is interested, wants to go into politics, wants to do good? Should they stick to their principles? Should they compromise? What are your sort of recommendations, your guiding thoughts? What would you tell them?
I'll take this first. I don't think when we talk about compromise, we talk about compromising principles or values. There's some things that you shouldn't compromise, and you've got to know that as a politician. But the problem with politics today, and as a human being who has to look in the mirror in the morning after you take one of these votes, but what I would say is, in America, we have let perfect be the enemy of good. By that I mean, we want what we want, and we want it the way we want it, and if it's not that way, I'm not going to do it. I wanted to do a bill that dealt with improving border security on the northern border. Everybody agreed with it. It was supposed to go through unanimous consent, and one person said, I'm not going to let that go, because one person can freeze you out from unanimous consent, and I'm not going to go with that because I want something for the southern border. I'm saying, I just want to do this one thing that's going to get us more border openings and more border patrol on the northern border, and everybody agrees that we need it. Perfect is the enemy of good. And if we're ever going to move policy along, I would tell young people, understand your values. Yes, be true, like Ed said, to who you are as a person, and know that if you do something that makes you feel internally bad, is probably you're compromising a core value. But you aren't going to get the whole loaf. That's not the way the world works. Certainly not the way legislation works. And so find those victories, because incrementally things can improve. And if you aren't willing to do incremental improvement, we're going to stall out the way we've been stalling out in Washington right now.
Yeah, I think advice to young people today is really to understand that our system is great, that our system works, and while it's difficult sometimes and man, it gets nasty and there's a lot of pushback or whatever, we have a political system in the United States of America that is solid, it's good, it's resilient, and it survives. And we have elections and they change, and everybody thinks, oh, I'm so important, I'm going to change the world when I get elected, whatever, and then they don't do it. But you know what? Our system survives. And the reason I say that is because I think we often, and especially students and young people today, think it's all about me. It's so important. I have to get in there. I have to get it done. I have to have my voice be heard. And when you do that, I think you really get to the point of saying, like I said, it's all about me and not about the people. And so my advice is always take the stance that you have to represent all the people all the time. If you're going to serve, you need to serve people, not the government, not your own policy, not your political party. You need to serve the people. And in doing that, when we talk to campus leaders here today, they're involved. There are various factions on the campus. There are other people. And Heidi's advice was, hey, go stand next to them, the people you disagree with, the people you don't understand. Be there, engage, learn from them. But here's the reality. They have their opinion. They arrive there through study, through education, through prayer, and it's real and right for them. It might be different than yours, but that doesn't make it wrong. And we need to have that understanding between people to make the system work.
So we're starting to learn who the candidates are for the 2024 election. For the presidential race, we know now, and we're starting to learn, we're going to learn soon for the North Dakota gubernatorial race, for the House race to replace the aspiring gubernatorial candidate in Kelly Armstrong, and other races. I'm curious kind of how you see kind of the, I'm going to say stakes, because I can't come up with a better word, of this election. Like, it doesn't have to be presidential, it can be congressional, it can be state level. Essentially, kind of how do you see this race in isolation for the stakes of it and kind of the history leading to this?
Well, I think, you know, in the governor's race specifically, what I'm interested in the governor's race and what the results are is I'm interested in both candidates saying, this is how I'm going to govern. And let me give you an example. Both are Republican gubernatorial candidates in North Dakota. Both of them, when they made the announcement, said, I'm going to follow along with Governor Burgum's effort to eliminate the income tax. So as I've been interacting and talking to both candidates, you know, my question is, what's your tax policy? I mean, what's best for the people of North Dakota? I want to know how you're going to govern. And if you're going to walk into that governor's office with a preconceived notion of what you're going to do already, you can't represent the people. And the example that I talk to them about is when you say you're going to lower or you're going to eliminate the income tax in North Dakota, I go, okay, so 60% of the people in North Dakota don't pay income tax. The high-level earners pay income tax. You know, eliminating the income tax sounds good to Wall Street and billionaires and things like that. But what about the people? Now, if you're going to have tax policy for the people, and by the way, tax policy isn't revenue. By the way, tax policy is behavior. And if you're going to have tax policy for the people, maybe eliminate sales tax on clothing, you know, or something like that benefits everybody in the state instead of a little bit. And I think that's the difference when you get in the chair of governor. You're representing all the people all the time, and you got to have that different perspective of being able to absorb what people are needing and looking for and wanting in their government and reacting to that and developing public policy to do that. So that's what I'm looking for in the governor's race. I haven't been satisfied with either one of them to this point in time.
Time to get in, Ed. Time to get in. The convention's this weekend.
Yeah. It is. Well, the elections, yeah.
The unfortunate thing is that this is not going to be a campaign of inspiration. So my hopes and my dreams is that we are inspired to vote for someone. And what you're going to hear, I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican, what you're going to hear is be very afraid of the other person. The other person's really a bad person. The other person will do really bad things. And that is going up and down the ballot. And you see it right now in the governor's race, right? I mean, there isn't any policy difference, so I don't know what all of the negative ads are, but you know, it just seems to me like that kind of fear or that kind of negative stuff is even infiltrating in a primary race in North Dakota in the dominant Republican Party. And so what I would say is that if you're looking for an inspiring, uplifting, boy, am I excited about America Democracy 2024, you should maybe go to sleep. Because it's not going to happen. And so the question becomes, in this cycle, you know, do we just let that wash over us and say, we're going to try and be better? Now, the good news is, on the presidential side, those two people will not be the nominee in 2028, right? And I'm not saying anything bad about my friend Joe. But I'm just saying that the dissatisfaction that the American public, as you keep saying that our system's great, our system's broken. Because we no longer find our political leaders inspiring. We don't have Bob Dole and McGovern, both former presidential candidates, who, by the way, I wanted to add this to your story. And the reason why the program that they did internationally is so important for people like for me is that because they have provided school lunch globally in the Dole-McGovern program, people will send their daughters to school because it's the only place they're going to get a meal. So this is where politics matters in a base level. And that inspiration that you can have from Bob Dole, a war hero, and by the way, so was George McGovern. George McGovern was like the premier fighter pilot in World War II. That service of the greatest generation, we have to somehow recapture that in our political leaders. And so I'm looking for 5 months of rancor and finger pointing and fear mongering, and when it results in success, it will continue until we, the people, decide we're not going to vote for people who don't inspire us anymore, and we're going to go out and work for people who do.
Thank you so much. We would like to provide the audience with an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So we don't want to monopolize your time here. I'm sure that audience members have questions as well. So if you would like to step up to the mic and ask the senator or the governor or both of them a question, now would be the time to do so.
Thank you. I just have maybe a comparison. 27 years ago in this community, we would not be having this meeting because we would be fighting a flood. And many of us in this room have thrown sandbags. It was a community effort where we got to interact, save our neighbors. After that time, and one image that I have personally is 1 a.m. I got a red alert call on my phone. I went up to the dike, started with 200 other people throwing sandbags, and all I could see to the east was water, and we were this far from losing this community. And it was saved because it was a total involvement effort. After that time, our city leaders, out of necessity, had these activities contracted, and the individual was taken out of that flood control equation. So another image I have is the January 6th insurrection with 3 FBI agents with their pistols trying to hold back a wild mob who's taken over the Senate chambers. To me, that is a very disturbing image, and it's equal to the image I had at the top of the dike. I do believe there's kind of an attitude in our country that says if we don't agree with the procedures, the politics that are in place, we'll just take it over and we'll do it our way. So yeah, civic discourse and respect for leaders, I think, is at a low point in many cases. And it's multiplied by how we fight politically and the ads that are prevalent today. So how do we turn that around? And I'm afraid of losing our democracy. How do we, because I think we're kind of spoiled. It's been done for us. I'm a grandparent. I spoil my grandkids. I'm guilty of that too. But I think it's very, very serious, and I would like your inspiration. And I respect Heidi. I was listening to CNN, and you called it out, and you said he's blowing a dog whistle to the various groups that are supporting him, and no other national leaders had that insight, and I really respect you for that insight that you have, and I'd really appreciate your comments.
My inspiration is people like Adam Kinzinger, like Mitt Romney, Richard Burr. I mean, I could go through all the people. I think there's been so much emphasis on the former president. We haven't had enough emphasis on the people who have aided and abetted by turning a silent ear towards that behavior. You know, right after the aftermath of January 6th, what was McConnell got up and said, this is horrible. He and Nancy were in the bunker together trying to figure out what they were going to do. I mean, and there was this kind of moment of unity until they saw some political consequence. And then it was like, you know, let's go down, Speaker McCarthy, let's go down and make sure that we're kissing the ring, if I can put it that way, and speaking to only an audience of one. And the rest of us saw what we saw. And there is a gaslighting in this country about what we saw. We saw what we saw. We saw what a leader who was supposed to unite the country and call it off do nothing. I was on ABC during we were just supposed to do a quick spot about the certification, and we ended up being on all day. And I kept saying, why doesn't the president say something? Why isn't he calling this off? He's the only person that can, despite repeated calls. And we can say, was that deplorable? You know, and I would tell you, I think it was deplorable. I think that it was a horrible moment in our history. But the people I fault are the people who, in spite of what they experienced that day, in spite of the fear that they had, now come back and stand with that person. How does that happen? And so you know, it goes back to rewarding the good guys. And unfortunately, guess what the good guys are doing? They're quitting because it's too hard. And so we, as I told students, I said, we're here to try and get you not to step back or run away, but to step up, because that's the only thing that's really going to solve this problem long term.
Well, I don't have much to add. I think it was awful. But I think the difficulty is, as Heidi mentioned, people who should be standing up and say it was wrong and did stand up and say it was wrong, all of a sudden saying, it's not their fault, or they were incited, or they, didn't really.
They were tourists.
They didn't really break down the door, when we all see it. And to me, that's the most difficult thing and hard for me to understand is how people don't stand up for the right. One of the things that one of the tenets in our governor's office was do the right thing. And doing the right thing isn't excusing people pounding on the doors and going through and sitting on the speaker's desk and ripping up papers and tearing up our Capitol. It's deplorable. And unfortunately, leadership is not standing up to it. Leadership is succumbing to this money thing and fame thing and whatever's going on out there with President Trump. And it's a situation that's causing us to kind of turn away from the truth and turn away from doing what's right, because people that should be are not standing up to say this is what's right.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. First, I'd like to say that I'm a state senator in North Dakota, and that in the North Dakota Senate last session, 70% of all our votes were unanimous. And it's the invisible system that works that no one sees. When things work, you don't notice. You only notice the conflict. And so with young people and with students, it's important to watch and be in the room so that you see that much of the governance actually works. My concern about the anti-politics and the disengagement of the citizens is it's become an anti-government feeling. The government is the problem. If we didn't have government, there's a really strong, not just the political tone, but the anti-government at all. Bills to eliminate all child welfare. Those are the things that worry me, and I think there's an underlying distrust of all government, and I'd appreciate your comments on that.
Well, Kathy, thanks for your question. I apologize for the quip about legislators. But I think Kathy's right. You know, there is a mistrust of our government. And here's what I'll give you a quick comment about why, and I'll give you maybe what could be a solution. So when we have this political campaigning going on, where each candidate is telling the other one they're a liar, and they're awful, and they're terrible, and they should never serve, and their character's the worst in history, you know, those kinds of things. Both candidates are going back and forth, and we see it all the time. What does a high school student think today? No matter who gets elected, they're bad. And we are shaping our government to be bad. We're shaping the image of government to be irresponsible and difficult and ne'er-do-wells that are leaders. That's a wrong thing to do. Government should be good. Government should be capable. And we should look to our government for inspiration and hope and character. And we don't. So here's one possible solution, and I think I've talked to Jack Selesky about it before, but I think there needs to be a quick tribunal of truth in place. And the National Advertisers Association, if you put a commercial on air, on radio or on television, your competitor can challenge that to say whether it's truth or not. If you're comparing your product to someone else's, you can say, hey, that's not true. And the people who belong to that association say if that's judged and that's challenged and judged to be wrong, you can't show it anymore, or you've agreed not to show it anymore or play it anymore. I think you need that in politics. I think we need that standard bearer that says, you know, I can challenge that. They're saying, calling me a liar, or I didn't vote that way, or I did do this or that. There's got to be that tribunal that stands up and says, wait a minute, it's got to be quick and fast because they're going to do it in the last minute, right? But I think you need to have that public standard that you can turn to that says, no, this is right, that's wrong, and the advertisers and the media and the people, the political pundits or whatever, have to abide by the decision.
I think that when you look at how we talk about government, think about this. Today in Haiti, there is no government. People are living in terror of what might happen. There is horrible things happening to families and just innocent people in Haiti because there's no government. And we have so taken for granted our rule of law, our economic system that was only possible because we have rule of law, because we have, you know, courts where you can adjudicate your contract claims. You know, we have equated government as something bad because we have not experienced a world where there is no government. And so when you look across the globe and see what does it look like if you don't fund the fire department? What does it look like if you're drawing water out of a river where cows are swimming right next to it and there's no water filtration system? Do you want to live in a country that does that? Do you want to live in a country where anyone can send you a pill and there's no FDA to say whether that's legitimate? Now, you may say it's gone too far, but we haven't talked about the basic benefits that we enjoy as citizens because of government. And Byron Dorgan used to do something when people would come and, you know, damn the government when he was talking. He would say, you know, when I think about the government, I think about the law enforcement officer who responded to my mother's fatal accident and what he saw and how he tried to help her. That's the government. So I just don't criticize the government. And so not enough of us personalize the benefit that we get. Even if we're not getting public assistance, we are getting a rich, rich benefit from the system that we live in, and it's only possible because we live in this country and we have government. Another legislator.
A
Pick on
recovering
him
legislator.
I don't apologize. I don't apologize.
Yeah, he's not apologizing to you, Koppelman.
I'm a recovering legislator. 28 years was enough, but and I've worked with both of you. I want to first of all say thank you to Concordia and to all the sponsors for doing this. We need to have this conversation, and we need to spotlight the idea of civility. So I appreciate you doing that. And I've recently joined the board of the center, the National Institute for Civil Discourse, which is all about this. And by the way, was founded by former presidents Bush the Elder and Clinton, who ran against each other and later became friends and realized we needed civility in politics. So a couple of things real quickly. One is I want to second what Kathy said about the North Dakota legislature, because although I will say it's getting more divisive, more vitriol than I ever saw years before. A couple of years ago, when I was Speaker of the House, I sponsored a bill and asked a former opponent of mine on the other side of the aisle, who was then in the legislature as well, to be a co-sponsor on an issue that was not political, that everyone could agree with, and it passed unanimously in the House and the Senate. And finding common ground, I guess, is the way I would put it, rather than compromise. Now, you talked a lot about compromise, so one of my two thoughts that I'd like you to expound upon. The question of compromise, I love what Thomas Jefferson once said. He said, on matters of style, swim with the currents. On matters of principles, stand like a rock. And I think that's what you were getting at earlier, Ed, about not compromising your principle, and I think, Heidi, you seconded that idea. So that's what I've tried to sort of live by. But the idea of civility being coming together and finding common ground rather than necessarily compromising on things that you hold dear. Second question is, I find as we talk about this that people assume that people that are willing to talk about civility and engage in it in government, in politics, are middle-of-the-roaders. In other words, they're either left-leaning Republicans or right-leaning Democrats. And I don't think that's true. It shouldn't be true, because I think people can stand with their convictions and be as liberal or conservative as they are, and still regard others with respect and esteem, and find ways to work together where they can, and disagree respectfully where they can't. I love what my friend, our mutual friend Ed, Mike Huckabee, once said. He said, I'm a conservative, I'm just not mad about it. And I love that, and that's how I've tried to live and to govern. So on those ideas, I just appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your further thoughtful comments.
Well, thanks, Kim. I think one of the things that I found in delivering the office, and I did make the comment, that we're moving around here on not compromising, but as you said, you don't have to compromise your principles. You can allow other principles in. You can allow the opportunity to craft part of your principles and part of somebody else's for what's good for the common good. But I don't think the conversation should be, boy, you have to compromise to make this happen. You incorporate the different views and the different sides to make it happen. And I think one of the, being a governor is a small fraternity, but there were 3 former governors to me that were active in the campaign against me, right? And so when I was running, we were dealing with that. After I was elected and after the politics was over, and you're talking about governing and turning for advice and talking to people that are experienced and capable, 2 of those governors became very good and close friends, and the other one became friendly, but and I think that's the point of all this is, it isn't about politics. It isn't about personal philosophy. It really is serving the people and representing the people out there to craft the direction of society and culture in our country. And that's hugely important, to be able to incorporate other values and character as you're doing that.
I would just add, civility is not something that happens organically. It has to be practiced, just like character has to be practiced every day. You have to think about, the morality of the decisions you make, or the morality of your behavior. That's just that's not that, it's not like, well, everybody by nature is good and they've now decided to do something mean. No, the positive action is being civil. And so I would just say that this civility is a practiced muscle memory. And once you start doing it, and once you start making it part of your value system, your behavior will change. But you've got to convince people to practice it every day. I used to say this about, I said, if you're an elite athlete, right, you practice every day. If you're a smart kid and you want to, go to, an elite school, or you want to come here to Concordia, you got to get the grades, you're going to study. But we never ask people to practice their character. And civility is part of that character. So we've got to make that part of our daily affirmations, our daily practice, to try and be as civil as we can be.
And part of civility that Heidi and I have had over time is some happiness and fun, by the way. We get too serious. We get like, this is going to change the world if this doesn't happen, or does happen. And I have to tell you, and we told a story earlier today a couple of times, but when we were in the midst, we were campaigning for different offices, but our political parties obviously were campaigning against each other. We ended up at the same event one time in the middle of the campaign, and we had young staff with us, and everybody's, kind of going back and forth when they're on stage. But afterwards, we got to talking. We took the staff and went bowling, right? And after bowling, we went to the bar next door and did karaoke.
It's a true story.
Yeah, and so, think of the kids that were there. It was fun, it was happy, it was difficult and hard work, but, you got to have some fun along the way, and you got to be happy about the whole thing. Carry some joy in what we're doing here.
I just want to tell, I don't keep a lot of memorabilia just because you get overwhelmed with plaques. Now, if you've ever given me a plaque, I've always appreciated it. But, eventually you don't want it. I have one thing that I keep in my drawer in my office, and it's a Groucho Marx, a set of glasses and a nose and the mustache. And you might wonder, where did I get that? Well, when I was running for governor, Ed was retiring because he had done 2 terms. When I was running for governor, they were going to come in and do a filming and the Industrial Commission meeting, and Ed was going to be there. So Ed showed up with the Groucho Marx costume on, so he wouldn't appear in any of my commercials. I said, all you had to do, Ed, was just paint your mustache a little dark. You didn't need to get the big nose thing. But it's something I treasure because it was lighthearted, it was funny, it wasn't, him going to camera saying, can you believe she's here? She wants to use my image, blah, blah, blah. He just had fun with it. And I think that, I don't know the old days of those kind of political pranks and that kind of funness. I think fun's gone out of the business of politics, and that's a big problem. Ed's right. I do still have those.
Hi, I'm Pat Sinner. I'm a lifelong North Dakotan, but my question is for you guys who both have been very partisan actors for each political party. Your thoughts or critiques on the state of your own parties today, as I see a lot of the solutions you guys are coming up with are engagement, people being involved and being part of the process. Well, at the same time, the parties seem to be becoming much more narrow in who they'll allow in or, be allowed to be part of that process. So if people are interested and engaged to try and find solutions, but also being excluded by the parties that are the means to do that, what are the answers and what kind of solutions you might have for those issues?
from the Republican Party standpoint in North Dakota, what I would say is Republicans have been in office too long.
I agree.
And not because Republicans don't perform in delivering, but here's what I'm talking about. So in North Dakota today, if you have an R behind your name, you're likely going to get elected. And what has happened is because people know that, Republicans have become complacent. They don't show up for meetings because it doesn't matter. My candidates are going to get elected anyway. They don't get involved in campaigning door to door because my candidates are going to get elected anyway. And so as Republicans have become disengaged in the process or become complacent and not worrying about it, they don't show up. And so the people who have showed up in the Republican Party today are the noisy ones, the culture warriors, the steamers and the fist wavers about we have to correct this and we have to do that or history's going to change. We really need to get this done. And I say that is I'd like the Republicans to stay in longer. But the point is, we as a party, with members of the party, with people who claim they're Republicans, are not standing up. They're not engaging. They're not voting. They're not putting forth candidates. They're not writing checks. They're not supporting because they don't have to. And because they don't have to, we are seeing factions of the party move one way or another, and we've got a lot of angst and fighting within the party about who's in charge and who's going to tell you or not you're a Republican, and are you one or are you not. And so that is going on in the party today. Now, again, we've been urging people all day long to get engaged in the process, and I'm hoping here now that we've seen kind of arrived at this point to where we have some really difficult situations in the Republican Party in North Dakota, I think more people are going to step up and get engaged and say, quote, everybody talks about we got to take the party back, right? Well, who's going to take the party back from whom? The point is, it's not the people in Bismarck, it's not legislators, it's not the NDGOP headquarters, it's people every day in the street, every day that believe in Republican principles, whether you agree with them or not, but they're the people who have to engage in the political process. We're not doing that in the Republican Party today. We're losing sight of the people. We're losing sight of what craft a policy that's good for all, and we're focusing on, social media hits and who can make the loudest noise, and you don't get good government in that direction.
And the Democratic Party in North Dakota owns some of this because we have to be more competitive if we want to build a center coalition for governing. You can't just. It's like any kind of resistance. If you lose the resistance, what happens? You move further in that direction, and so it's a challenge. I mean, it is a huge challenge because our state politics have become nationalized. And so however the Democratic Party is perceived nationally, that's who you are as a Democrat. And that's a huge burden to carry, especially when you don't agree with a lot of those issues. And so is there room for someone like me who's a centrist who thinks that regulation may have gone too far or that we're spending too much money for the last 5% of perfection in regulation? Is there some place for me? And quite honestly, I think there is in the Democratic Party. We aren't loud enough in the middle, and the voices of the extremes always get the press. Now, there are a number of movements within the Democratic Party. There's something called the New Deal Democrats, and that's kind of the Democratic, there used to be a Democratic leadership council that launched Bill Clinton's campaign, and those were centrist Democrats, right? So you're now seeing an emergence of these groups nationally trying to change the narrative about what it means to be a Democrat. New Deal Democrats, the New Democrats, the Promise Keepers, the Blue Dogs. And so there's an attempt to broaden the appeal of the Democratic Party. And until that happens nationally, it's going to be really hard for red state Democrats to move ahead because we're always going to be lack of a better word, burdened by national political ideas that we don't necessarily agree with. Someone there? Hi there. Are you a student?
Yeah, I'm a college student, yeah. So, you know, sometimes it's good to come out to stuff.
Can you hold the mic up?
Yeah, I can. Oh, I can just come closer to it, too. So sometimes it's good to come out to stuff like this, or at least for me, just to kind of see what's going on. And, you know, I've never been in a room like this, but, you know, it seems like, you know, a lot of you guys have history. You know, you guys are cracking jokes and everybody's laughing. It's just going over my head, you know, because I don't know what's going on. So, you know, the dude with the nice hair that spoke that came up here first, he said 27 years ago there was like a flood. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what's going on. I wasn't, you know. So, my question is, like, for me to gauge where I'm at, I have to know what's going on. So then, like, where do I find information on North Dakota specifically or Fargo specifically so that I know what's going on? Because I know that for me, if I don't know what's going on, you know, everybody I know back home definitely doesn't know what's going on. So, yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so don't go away. So, where do you currently get your information?
I don't watch TV.
And that is totally consistent.
Yeah. So, I mean, other than that, maybe word of mouth, unless I come to something like here or somebody will tell me. And I'll be on social media, but definitely social media will not, like, my feed will not tell me nothing political, you know.
This is so important, this question about where do you find a place where you can get information, where you can be plugged in to what's happening in the community, what's happening in our state, and how does that work for you? That is where we are failing with I mean, we tell jokes about that you know, we all know each other up here, right? And so how does that feel for someone who wasn't even born when we were in office, right? I mean, you were not even born. You weren't even a glimmer in your parents' eye when we were in office. And so we forget that you are the future and that we need to figure out how we engage in a way that is accessible and not just one-offs, events like this, but more dialogue. And so the first thing I would say is there is tons of opportunity to watch the city commission on television, but there also is an opportunity to have dialogue with the people that you go to school with. You know, what do they know? What do they care about? Where are they from? What's the challenges in their community? What's the opportunity for you if you wanted to stay in this community, kind of moving forward? What are the issues that are critical? And I think you've got great staff here and great professors, but this is a failure of our political system because we aren't seeing you. And when we do see you, we see you as, oh, maybe he could vote for us, but if he's not going to vote, we don't really care about what you know, right? And so, you know, I'd love to come back and you gather up 10 of your students, and I'll promise to sit down and talk about what I know, talk about what I don't know, and spend some time. Promise?
Thank you. Yeah.
And I think one of the come on up. I think come on up. I think one of the things that I've been impressed with on the campus today is we've heard a lot of programs that are put on the campus. I mean, there are a lot of gatherings like this for students to try to talk about politics or try to talk about character or you know, whatever the case may be, and standards. I think I'm hoping that this event will lead to more on-campus participation, and when you have the political rodeo or the whatever it's called, I can't remember the name of it. Politics Cafe. That's it. when you have the Politics Cafe, you know, one of the comments was made today was, well, we don't really advertise it too much. We kind of, we don't want to get in and have people screaming and yelling and going through the, so we don't, advertise it. I'd be flying the airplane over with the thing, saying get engaged in this process. We're here on campus, we're learners, we're educators. This is an opportunity to engage students, and it's an opportunity for students to get engaged. And so I'm hoping we'll see a lot of follow-up on the campus with events like this over and over again just for students.
Thank you. I mean, on that, you see the overcommitted crowd of students sitting in the back, and they're cheering you and not heckling, but rather talking amongst themselves. One thing I learned in high school is when you point a finger towards somebody, you're pointing 3 towards yourself. And it makes me wonder a lot about, the conversations that we have politically. To me, it comes down to 2 things. One is moral superiority. We think we got it all right. The others don't. And 2, we back it with social currency. That is, how are we good people, and how do we care and fear for ourselves, and therefore we deserve to be heard. You challenged earlier when the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader were talking and wanting to figure it out on January 6th, right? And then later, their audiences were different. It makes me think about people that hold space for us to also talk, and it makes me think about the organizers of this event. We have the Lorentzsen Center, we have the Otto Bremer, and we have the JCRC. And I feel queasy about the JCRC because as a Palestinian, I feel like they do a lot of the finger pointing. And what are their moral superiority? They discredit calling Israel an apartheid state because they think it's cynical, even though it's backed by Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and B'Tselem. They call the military occupation in the West Bank a difficult conversation or complicated status. They say Free Palestine calls for the eradication of Jews. And they call the right to boycott peacefully, which again, both Minnesota and North Dakota there are laws against it. They call it violent. They're social currencies to distance themselves from the conversation and say we don't feel included and therefore it's anti-Semitism. My question, therefore, isn't anti-Semitism, is to tie a fate of a religion, a beautiful religion, to a state that is Israel that is committing war crimes? And when are they willing to listen to the other people in the community with malice towards none? Makes me really wonder as we look at the younger generation and point fingers at them and say violent, exclusive, and so on. I leave the question to you, but also to the organizers of the event.
Want to do the organizers first?
No, I mean, we hope that by being here and by telling you of our experience of listening and to not judge, and not knee-jerk maybe where we've been in the past, that we will learn something, that we will have an opportunity to have dialogue. I think I'm not comfortable saying that the sponsors here are somehow complicit in what's happening in Gaza. I don't think that's fair because you're pointing the finger at them, right? But I do think that the voice of so many people who are suffering so brutally in Gaza needs to be heard in the American political discourse. And certainly, I think as time has gone on, more and more people are stepping back and saying it's time to reevaluate how we operate or how we talk about this in the international community. And you saw that in the UN with the UN resolution. And so you're seeing at least an attempt to understand how we can resolve this conflict in a way that saves lives, really, and gets humanitarian relief where it needs to be. We don't destroy people who are trying to deliver humanitarian relief. But I think to condemn the sponsors is not fair. I think we're here to try and say listening is the most important thing we can do. And the thing that I've always done is I think, if I were you, how would I feel? How would my reaction be? It may not result in the same, kind of belief system that you have, because I'm going to have a different life experience than yours. But my job is to understand yours and understand your perspective and respond to it. And I will tell you, I am deeply concerned about what's happening in Gaza. I'm deeply concerned about the hostages. I'm deeply concerned that this part of the world is experiencing this kind of horrible turmoil, and it's resulting, unfortunately, as is true in every kind of conflict of its type, innocent people being injured and starving and not living in a thriving society. And so I just tell you, my job is to stand in your shoes and see it from your perspective and bring that into, if I were in the Senate right now, to bring that into my decision making.
I think there were a couple of elements, in your comments, and appreciated your comments earlier today too. The one thing you noticed is when you point a finger to somebody, you're pointing it at yourself. There's a biblical principle about before you stone somebody, take the log out of your own eye first. And I think that's an important element when we're challenging someone else, et cetera. And I wanted to follow up a bit on your comment about a government, and I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said something about a government being tied to a religion. And if you look at Hamas and the Palestinian government, it's tied to Hamas, who are terrorists and who are committed to their religion in the name of their religion for their direction. If you look at Iraq, if you look at Iran, the Muslim faith drives government. We incorporate the religion and the religion principles in driving government. And I think that's where the United States is in a wonderful position, to where the United States founders said there's going to be no government religion. There's no government being driven by a religion or a certain principles of religion or certain philosophies of religion. We're a free country. And I think that's where we kind of get mixed up on the whole Gaza, West Bank, Palestinian, Hamas, and especially with the Iranian government, whose stated mission is to eliminate Israel off the face of the map. So, the things are so difficult over there and stuff, but I'm with Heidi. I think when we get into these war type of situations, it's too easy to say, oh, well, that's collateral damage. They hit me first in the sandbox, so some of their people are going to suffer. Too bad. And we just can't take the humanity out of the situation. And you know what? It's both sides. We have a chance for a ceasefire. We can release hostages. We can get humanitarian aid. We can cease fire in Israel and stop lobbing rockets and bombing tunnels and, start dropping food, et cetera. But, both sides have to do it. And you can't just sit there and say, oh my gosh, this side is really bad and that side is really good. I mean, how long have we been talking about a ceasefire? And how long have elements of a ceasefire been on the table when each of the other countries won't do it for whatever reasons?
Abdal, thank you for your question, but in the interest of time, and I hate to admit it, but we are not going to solve the matter tonight. But what I want to point out is that this is really a wonderful opportunity to emphasize the human connection. I mean, you are here to talk about your human connection as politicians who connected with one another. And this is an opportunity to hear people and to hear everyone's voice. And as Senator Heitkamp said before, it is an incremental process. We have to continue the conversation. And I think this was a wonderful start, and I'm very thankful that you were able to join us tonight. And I would like to ask my colleague, Dr. Howard, to thank the organizers of this event.
And we're going to be around afterward. We're going to be around afterward to visit more.
So we'd like to thank the sponsors, the Lorentzsen Center for Faith and Work, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, Oren and Sharron Steinfeldt Foundation, and the Interfaith Alliance of North Dakota for their participation. Please give them a round of applause.
And I would like to thank Senator Heitkamp and Governor Schafer for sharing your thoughts, your experiences. And let us leave tonight taking President Lincoln's address to heart. His inaugural address from 1865 ends with the following, and I quote, "To do all which we may achieve and cherish a just and a lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." Have a wonderful night, and thank you for coming.